I recently got one of these, an EASA Medical Class 2 certificate for private pilots. But where do you get one of those? What do they test when you get it? And how long is it valid for? Stay tuned. Let's start with who actually needs a medical certificate. Most of you who clicked on this video are probably pilots or about to become one. And yes, all pilots, both private pilots and commercial pilots, need a medical certificate to exercise their privileges of flying an aircraft. However, pilots are not the only ones. Generally speaking, everyone who's involved in the aviation business will need some sort of medical certificate, including cabin crew members, air traffic controllers, and flight engineers. Now that you know if you have to get a medical certificate, which one do you need? According to the European Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA in short, there are 3 classes of medical certificates. First, there's the Medical Class 1, which holders of a commercial pilot license, an airline transport pilot license, or a multi-crew pilot license need to get. Then there's also the Medical Class 2, which all private pilots need to have, as well as flight engineers. And lastly, there's also the Medical Class 3, which is for all air traffic controllers. However, the EASA also recognizes 2 more types of medicals. The first one is the cabin crew medical, which, as the name suggests, all cabin crew members need to get. And then there's also the LAPL medical. The LAPL medical is basically a version of the Medical Class 2, but with slightly relaxed requirements, which holders of an LAPL, so a light aircraft pilot license, can get. There it's important to note, though, that the LAPL medical is only valid in EASA countries, whereas the Medical Class 2 is valid worldwide. But moving forward in this video, I'll only talk about the Medical Class 2. Since I was getting my medical for the very first time, I was asking myself if there's actually an ideal time point to get it. According to the EASA Part Med, so the legislature that governs aviation medicals, you need to have your medical at the latest before your first solo flight. However, I chose to get my medical even before that. I've just completed my theory, but I haven't written the theory exam yet, and I also haven't taken any flight lessons. Now, the reason why I wanted to get it already now is because I didn't want to spend significant money or time without knowing for sure that I would be fit to fly. And that's what I would also recommend to anyone else, but of course, when you get your medical is totally up to you. Once you've decided to get your medical, where do you get it? For a Medical Class 2, you basically have 2 options. You can either get it at an aeromedical center, or you can get it at an aeromedical examiner, or AME. However, since aeromedical centers also issue Class 1 medicals, they will probably not have any free appointments for your Class 2 and will refer you to an AME instead. At least that was the case for me. But in any case, how do you find an aeromedical center or an AME in the first place? In Switzerland, there are 3 aeromedical centers and a number of AMEs all across the country. The Federal Office for Civil Aviation in Switzerland issues a list with all of their approved aeromedical centers and AMEs, which I'll link to below. If you're not from Switzerland, I'm sure that the aviation authority in your country issues a similar list. And that's basically where you can then just choose one. The way I did it was I went through the list of AMEs, I had a look which ones were close by, and then, as you do, I Googled them and had a look at their reviews. If you already know some pilots and they can give you a recommendation for a specific AME, then that's even better, but I didn't have that, so I just asked good old friend Google. And once then I picked an AME, I just headed over to their website and booked an appointment. Again, the entire booking process might be slightly different depending on the country you live in or the specific AME that you go to. But in general, it should be fairly easy. So now that you've booked your appointment, what can you expect when you get there? In other words, what do they test? This again might depend a little bit on where you live because local regulations might slightly differ. It might also depend on your age or your general health status. But for my initial Medical Class 2 certificate in Switzerland, they first asked me some general health related questions. For example, whether I sleep well, whether I drink, smoke, etc. Then they wanted to know my medical history. and they also asked me to fill out a questionnaire assessing my mental health. Then they went on to test a bunch of different things. For example, they tested my eyesight, including color vision. They tested my hearing. They took a urine sample to test for things like diabetes or kidney function. They also checked my hemoglobin levels. Then they monitored my heart rate, my blood pressure, and took an EKG. They also wanted me to do some coordination and balance tests. And lastly, they also did a general physical examination, like the one you also get from your general practitioner. And the whole thing took around 1 hour in total. Now, when you go to renew your medical certificate, what exactly they test then might differ again on your age, the type of medical you're getting, and also your general health status. As most things in aviation, getting your medical will cost some money. And at least here in Switzerland, health insurance does not cover it. And I feel like I'm saying this in every other sentence, but how much exactly it will cost will depend on the country you live in and also the specific AMI that you go to. To give you an example, I paid around 300 Swiss francs to get my medical certificate, which might sound like a lot at first, but it's more or less the standard hourly rate for medical doctors here in Switzerland. I assume that in other European countries it's gonna be a little bit cheaper, probably more in the range of 100 to 200 euros. But if you know any specific numbers, let me know in the comments down below, because that might be interesting for others to know as well. Nonetheless, given how expensive everything else is in aviation, I do believe that the medical certificate is still comparatively cheap, especially since you don't need to get it very often. Which brings me to the next question. How long is a medical class 2 valid? Or in other words, how often do you need to renew your medical certificate? According to EASA Part Med, a medical class 2 certificate is valid for 5 years if you're below age 40, for 2 years if you're between ages 40 and 49, and for 1 year if you're above age 50. The renewal of a medical class 2 can be done both in an aeromedical center or at an AMI, although it's highly recommended that you always go to the same place to renew your medical unless you have a very good reason not to do so. Another thing that's important to know is that you need to renew your medical certificate up to 45 days prior to the expiry date written on your certificate if you want to have a seamless renewal. And I don't know about anyone else, but at least for me, getting my medical for the very first time was that big, massive, scary thing. Most of all because I didn't know what to expect, and also because of the unfounded fear that for some reason maybe I wouldn't get it. Turns out that if you're generally healthy, if you exercise on a regular basis, and you don't have any preconditions, then you should be able to pass your medical exam. But then again, I'm no doctor, so don't take my word for granted. Also, I got very lucky with the AMI I picked, because they were super nice, they answered all of my questions, and they explained the entire procedure beforehand, and that really eased my nervousness, because I knew what was coming up and what I could expect. Perhaps that's survivorship bias, but now that I've passed my medical and the whole scary bit is over, I actually think that this was a very nice opportunity to get a full checkup on your health, which, in all honesty, I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Now, if you have some more questions or suggestions, then please leave them down in the comments below, and I'll try my best to answer all of them. But keep in mind, I'm no medical doctor, so if you have any concerns about any conditions or limitations that you might have, I am not qualified to answer these questions. These are questions that you need to discuss with an aeromedical examiner. I will also link to the EASA Part Med down below in case you want to read up on all the regulations around aviation medicals. But here again, keep in mind that local regulations from your country might apply as well, on top of these EASA regulations. But that was it from my side. I hope you have a wonderful day and see you in the next one. Bye!